Hi, great to have you back. Good evening. This is another episode of my Idea Machine Challenge on my blog lifesciencementor.com. I'm Florian, your host for the evening, and today I'm talking about 10 lines that I heard recently that left me wondering and why. So I had to think a little bit about that because while I'm reading a lot and listening a lot to different voices, podcasts, and so on, I usually try to grasp an overall meaning from what I hear. So single lines don't really automatically get stuck in my brain. Um, that's probably just reflected in the way that I'm thinking. Probably other people learn about remembering very specific phrases, which is an interesting topic in and of itself. How do we learn? How do we perceive information? But still, there had to be some lines that stuck in my mind. And yeah, I thought about it and I found 10. And I'm going to talk a little bit about them. So first of all, the first one that I heard was from MJ DeMarco, and I think I talked about that a little bit in an earlier episode. It's basically he talked about what makes an entrepreneur different from an employee. What is your mindset? And one of the points was that most people say, "Oh, yeah, I wish I would do something on my own, but it's just too hard." Right? And he said, if an opportunity is too hard, then that is the opportunity. And I found that so great because it means that, you don't need overarching talent to do what you want to do. All you need is a commitment to hard work. All you need is a commitment to often taking the first step towards it and not saying, "Oh, it's too hard," not imagining all the negative consequences that can come about as a result from you taking on the opportunity that you have. I mean, if you think about it, everything in history was once too hard. The brothers Wright, they didn't say, "Oh, we sure wish to be flying, but it's just too hard," right? And Steve Jobs, when he took over Apple back in the 90s, and I don't know whether everyone who listens to this podcast still remembers that. It's actually a fascinating. Think back is really fascinating if you think about it. So in the 80s, you had Bill Gates coming with Microsoft. You had a company called IBM, which I don't really. I think, yeah, they're still around, but they had played a huge role, much bigger than Microsoft in the 80s, and Microsoft has become much bigger. And then there was Apple. And the early Microsoft machines, those computers, had nothing like a graphic interface. You had to type in texts, and you could do little commands. The first computer games, the first adventure games, the interactive games, you actually had to you had to type in the text. The story would be written on the screen. Like, you find yourself in this labyrinth, and to the left there's a brown door, and to the right there's a green door. Or you could go ahead, what do you do? And you type in, "I'm walking straight up." There was nothing with clicking or touching with your fingers. Nothing. It was all text based. And then Apple came along in the 80s, right? And Apple had this graphic interface, and that Bill Gates copied that later on with Windows. And in the mid of the 90s, Apple was basically pretty much done. Everyone thought Apple, that's a dream of yesterday. Nothing comes out of it. Microsoft now does Windows, so they don't have an advantage with their graphic interface anymore, and so on and so forth. And I think Apple had the bigger problem of Apple was that they were running on Motorola processors, and those weren't as powerful as Intel processors that Microsoft computers had. And Apple had also their operating system was only working on Apple, and Microsoft licensed its operating system to like anyone who wanted to build a computer. and commoditized the whole operating system. And then Steve Jobs came back to save Apple, and Steve Jobs could have said, "Oh man, that's too hard." But no, he went and he took action, um, and while he's an extremely talented entrepreneur, I believe, and a very creative thinker, or was, um, he didn't say, he didn't have to wave a magic wand or anything, right? So he wanted to get it back, and he invested the hard work. And there are numerous other examples. So this sentence, if an opportunity is too hard, then that is the opportunity. It basically means get your head down, get into the trenches and start working, and then you can get where you want. Nobody says that you will be a smash hit success overnight, right? But you will be successful when you put in the work, and then over time you'll get better, right? So and it's hard, yeah. Maybe it even sucks a little bit that you have to invest hard work, but understand that in the end you can generate something based on how smart and how hard you work, basically, and that is something very, very relieving. Um, that, yeah, basically means you can start your business, you can go after your opportunities. The 80% of it is hard work, and you shouldn't just not do it because it's too hard. Then another line, number 2, is just don't fuck up. There was a video by Aaron Clarey from Captain Capitalism, and that struck a mark. Just don't fuck up. So in this video, he's basically shown he sits on a mountain range at the border between Idaho and Montana, and he said that whole trip had cost him $400, and yet he was like far. There was like far, and there were few people far in between. And he said, it doesn't cost much for a day trip. You can crash with buddies, and then you can see amazing nature. Yet only few people are doing these trips. Why? Well, one reason may be that most people have to do payments that enslave them for things that they don't really need, right? So you can easily rack up a car lease per month for $400, right? Where, do you really need the Beamer to represent or to signal status? You could have a normal car that just gets you from position A to B, prevents you from getting wet in the rain, and transports you, and then you still have money to take amazing trips into nature, or really do what you like doing, right? And for that you can get by on $30,000 a year, right? You don't need to like live in a big city where the rent is expensive. You can live in the countryside, have your friends and buddies there, just take hiking trips into nature, and you'll be fine with like, oh, I don't know. Let me guess. You pay $500 to $600 rent. I'm living close to New York, and I pay $900 rent. No, $962 rent per month, and just because it's close to New York. And if you just look at Las Vegas, you can get a 2-bedroom apartment, like a couple miles away from the strip, 2-bedroom with a jacuzzi, for $700 a month, and that's on the expensive side, right? So you can easily live on less rent in the countryside, and just be sufficient with like not a mega income per year, but as much that you can do all you want to do. You don't, just by avoiding to pay money for cars that you don't need, other stuff that you don't need, houses that you don't really need that are too big, children that you get without really being able to afford them financially. That puts a huge strain on you and your family. So there are ways to get around that, right? There are ways to have wise financial planning and not get into these situations. And Aaron was basically saying, look, if you want to enjoy life, you don't really need that much. You just make sure that you don't fuck up, right? And then you can have a great life. And I found that I found that such a great line because you can, every big journey starts with a small step. And to know that even the small steps that you take can already get you there where you want to be is incredibly freeing. And I really like that line a lot. Just don't fuck up. Then number 3 is basically a guideline to realize what you can afford. It's from MJ DeMarco again, and it says, if you have to think about it, you can't afford it. If you want to drink a coffee, right? You go to the next Starbucks and buy a cup of coffee, and you don't think about if that impacts your finances. That's fine. But then lots of people just say, oh, if that car only costs me $500 a month, that's maybe a little bit much. Well, if I don't eat out per month, and then they start calculating. I know because I've done it in the past as well. You start calculating. Yeah, maybe I could. Maybe I don't go out for dinner, and then maybe I could then squeeze the car payment in. Stop. Don't. If you have to think about it, you can't afford it. If you have to think about a $500 car loan per month, then just spend a year on public transport, put the $500 aside per month instead of paying for a loan, and then after 1 year have the $5,000 for a used car that still works as well as a new loan. If you think about it, a $50,000 car payment could probably get somebody who earns $200K per year thinking. But even if you only earn $50,000 per year, which is like a middle management job, you can easily afford a $5,000 car. Would probably not give you much toothache, right? Or much headache. So if you have to think about it, you can't afford it. Number 4, it's from Gary Vaynerchuk. And he said, people think the glass is half empty, while in reality, it's 70% full. And I love that because, the old adage like, are you a glass half empty or glass half full person? But he says we have so many opportunities nowadays that, the glass is basically 70% full. And if you think about it, yes, it is. If you want to start your own business, you can completely do that without any overhead. Yes, you still have to work hard, which brings us back to the first line. But maybe you don't need to work that hard, right? You need to work hard, but it's more important to not fuck up, and you already be at an income that gets you a good life, right? Or you basically realize that the environment we live in gives you amazing opportunities, and it could well be that in 50 years people look back on this time saying, gee, man, people must have been so lucky back then. The internet was all free, everyone could use it, you could do whatever you wanted, right? So guys, use this now, and girls, use this now that you have the internet at your disposal. In the past, if you wanted to start your own business, you had to rent. You had to rent rent a room where you had to make sure that your clients would already pay you as much in the beginning that you can already cover rent. And yeah, don't get me wrong, people were still being able to start their own businesses from their own living room, right? But then it was also much more difficult to find customers, right? You not only if you start a blog or like an Instagram account or whatever, you have literally zero overhead. A blog costs you $3 per month. That's it. And it's all like sweat equity that you put in, and literally $60 a year. That's it. No rent, and you don't need to scramble for getting customers. Google Analytics can tell you where your customers are coming from. Where do people come from to go to your blog? You can do something similar what I'm doing right now. I'm talking about different points every day in this idea machine challenge, right? The ideas are wide. The topics that I'm talking about are widely varying, right? And and I'll see what most of you find most interesting, and then after 6 months I'll probably focus a little bit more on those topics, right? So you can basically take a year of just writing down whatever is in your mind to know, to get your idea what you want to do, right? Because you can directly interact with people immediately. And that is truly a glass that's 70% full. I think I know why people think the glass is half empty, because the narrative is that, and also in the US, the whole story of the US is basically all entrepreneurs, there's always this hero story where the hero had to overcome an incredible difficulty, right? He had to slay a dragon or something like that. And that has led many of us to believe that, the system has it against you. The system has it out for you. So you need to overcome this system. And then that can easily lead to you thinking that, then we think that, the system is something negative that we have to overcome. And then we can easily think that, it's tough. It's a tough racket to get ahead. And then we get into the position where we think the glass is half empty. And we become pessimistic. But that is really not the case. Rather than fighting against the system, it's basically the system that we live on. It's basically an ocean with lots of different tides that can drag you every which way. However, if you learn to ride and surf the tide, it can bring you exactly where you need to be. And I think that's the mindset that is more conducive to having a less stressful and more successful time. Because if you assume that the glass is 70% full and you just lack 30%, you just have to do the last 30% to get to where you want. That's certainly easier than saying the glass is half empty, and you maybe need to give 51% more to get towards your goal. Number 5 is a saying by Bruce Lee: "Be like water." So instead of pushing through a wall, through an obstacle to get to your goal, you just flow around it. You find a way to align yourself with what your environment can give you. So you accept the reality and make it work for you. And that is really important. It also means that in connection with number 4, that your glass is 70% full, so you would leverage your strength in the current environment. You don't try to fight the environment. For example, I have worked 20 years so far, and I may even continue working in academic science. And I found academic science a little bit lacking towards the end in the possibility to provide value for a lot of people, right? You get very specialized. And in the end, there's like 4 or 5 people that really understand what you're researching on. That for me, that lacks a little bit connection. I want to connect to more people. I want to provide value for more people. So now I could just sit there and mope and say, "Oh, I chose the wrong path 20 years ago, boo-hoo-hoo, poor me." Or I could start using the system that's around me, like social media and possibilities of email, and then leverage my strength that I learned. So I learned a lot about biology and life sciences, about cancer research, about the treatment of various diseases. So I think in James Altucher's Choose Yourself Guide to Wealth, he has the example of newsletters, right? I could, for example, make a newsletter with the newest cancer treatments and send that out to you once a week. I may even try out something like that. So basically, you have that would be one example how I could use my own strength, right, my own knowledge, I can leverage my own knowledge and use the strength that the internet is giving me to reach a lot of more people. And you could do the same. There's something you're good at. There's something you really know in and out. And if you're just starting out with if you're in your early 20s, you start starting out, then you just learn like lots of different skills. At one point, you have amassed a skill set, and that skill set you can leverage and use all the infrastructure that modern social media gives us um, to reach people. And that's basically the blueprint. So you are basically like water. You do not try to fight the system. You are swimming with it. You're using the tide to bring you where you want to be. Be like water. Number 6. This one is by Sidney Brenner, who got the Nobel Prize for medicine or physiology a couple of years back for his work on the model organism Caenorhabditis elegans, which is a small worm that has precisely 1,063 cells, I think. And in the 70s, that wasn't really known, so he mapped out every single cell where it would end up later. So he basically elucidated where cells in our organism are coming from, where are our nervous systems coming from, where our heart muscle cells come from, and everything. He used that model organism, and he looked at a process that was called apoptosis, where cells would be going in self-destruct mode to make room for other cells. And great work. And he spoke on a conference and he said, you had this notion of the system is always bigger than the sum of its parts. And he corrected that statement saying, a system can never be more than the sum of its parts and their interactions with each other. Right? And that makes sense. And I found the sentence great because if you say a system is always more than the sum of its parts, then there's some diffuse metaphysical level there where you just give up. You say, we can never know all there is. There's a new dynamic if you put all the parts of the system together. The dynamic which we can never understand. While that may be, Brenner had with a sentence built a base for in principle being able to understand it, right? So you can basically take the system off into its parts logically, and then you just have to figure out how these parts interact with each other. Now, that part can be something that is too difficult to understand for normal human minds. Well, that may well be. But now it's away from saying, system, there's always one diffuse level that we somehow just don't understand. And to me, it's much more relieving to know that, yeah, you need to understand the interactions of the parts, but then you could, in theory, understand the whole system. If that's a possibility in practical terms, we don't know, right? But at least having some sort of blueprint or strategy, what you would have to do to understand the whole system, that is great to know. Number 7. That comes from Justin Garcia, aka Master Chim, at thepressureproject.com. And he said, it's easier to fix a boat than to calm the ocean. And I found this a relief, because that means that we are only responsible for that which we can directly change. We can change our own behavior, and we cannot change the whole environment we're in. That's just happening, right? What I talked about before, the whole social media landscape, we cannot just try to just do away with freedom of speech on Twitter, for example, try to educate people or give some political orders that certain speech has to be banned from Twitter or whatever, so that people can figure out these things better and are not scared from using Twitter. That's all nonsense, because it's far too big. It's like an ocean, the whole social media. You cannot change that. Although there are people who really tell you, let's fix reality. And I think that's just ludicrous, right? So you cannot fix reality. Reality just happens. What you can do is you can fix your own behavior relative to the reality you're living in, and then make progress for yourself. And that is very close to the statement, or amazingly, the notion saying that the easiest way to get ahead in life is to not have any expectations. Be happy by not expecting anything. Do work as hard as you want to do, work as hard as you need to do your own thing, but don't expect anything from the universe. If you don't expect anything from the universe, it'll give you just enough what you need. As the famous philosopher Michael Jagger once said, you can't always get what you want, but if you try sometime, you might get what you need. Number 8. This one's from Mike Cernovich. The past is an illusion, your future is real. So basically meaning that that our mindset determines how we see the past. If the past was difficult and we are successful, we are saying we succeeded despite the odds. If we fail, then we say we couldn't. It was to expect because the odds were stacked against us. See how that works? Is that really what happened in the past? For one person, the odds were stacked against you, and for another, they were not stacked enough against you because you could overcome them. So the past is very much part of the eye, lies very much in the eye of the beholder, right? So if you're successful, you think your past was great or you were strong enough to overcome it. If you're like a optimistic person, like a person who relies on himself to solve problems, then you will tend to say, I succeeded against the odds. And if you are like worried person, afraid of change, and don't really have much self-esteem, you would tend to say, I couldn't, even though I'm successful, that was just pure luck. And that was me. That was me a few months ago, really. I talked about that yesterday when I talked about how I overcame imposter syndrome, right? For a long time, I thought, I'm not really that good. And whatever happened was just pure luck. And I felt pretty miserable because of that. Until I overcame that by just realizing that it's not important to what I want to not important to judge myself positively, but it's important to do what I really want to do. But I digress. Fact is that your past is not more real than your future, right? Because it's always a story that you tell yourself. And what if you just say, what happened in the past is an illusion and what happens in the future is real? Because most people say, if I could just go back 2 years and just do my decision differently back then, everything would be better. Feel free to do that. Just let me know when you invented your time machine, right? Because that's what you need to go back. So you can't go back, but you can go forward, and you automatically do that. We're all sitting in sort of a time machine that moves us towards the future, and if we learn to think that what happens in the future will happen, right? If we regard our future as being real, then we will look forward to actually having the chance to influence our life's path. Once again, of course, it's easier to fix the boat than to calm the ocean. So we can only give it our all, and then see where the tide is getting us. But there's no use in putting more truth to the past than the future, because that just makes you live in the past, and you'll never be able to improve, or you become too self-absorbed that you think everything will always be the way, right? Some people have been successful in the past, and they think they don't need to do anything because they have done it in the past, they will always do it again, and then they forget to work towards their goal. That is also detrimental. You have to make it happen in the future, and for that reason, it's easier to regard the future as being real and the past as an illusion. Number 9. That's actually a Bob Dylan song. When your gravity fails, or when your gravity drops, and negativity don't pull you through. I found that amazing. because first of all, I really like the song. I think it's underappreciated. It has a very nice melody. It has a very nice drive forward, and um, it actually makes me happy hearing it. But if your gravity fails and negativity doesn't pull you through, that means that the downfall is not your default state. That means you cannot even rely on negativity. And I find that really freeing, right? If you assume that eventually something bad is always going to happen, or if you assume that somehow things are always shitty, or like some people have that mindset, and that mindset is doesn't help you in any way, right? And it's in a way very depressing because if negativity is the one thing that anchors our fantasy, our wishes, our desires into reality, if all else fails, you will just have to start again. That's not a very optimistic message, right? And that for that reason, I find that Fall That line really good, because might as well then rely on positivity to get you through, right? Even with a negative mindset, you won't be any more solid in life than with a positive one. Might as well see things in a good perspective. And that was number 9. And number 10 is from James Altucher, and he said that the United States, that everything in life is a story. And the United States are a story. Maybe the greatest story ever told, but a story. So I found it very impressful. Very impressing. It impressed me a lot. Because, as I say, history is written by the victor. And that means, and you need to take Mike's statement from before, that our past is an illusion, then means nothing in our past has happened under guarantee, and it means that the strength of your story determines your success. And if you think about that, it means that if you learn to tell a great story about your own life, then your chances of becoming happy and getting to where you want is much higher than if you just think things are just happening to you, right? For me, going back to it's easier to fix your boat than to calm the sea. For me, that boat that you fix is the story of your life, right? It's the boat, you sit in the boat and swim across the ocean. So the story of your life is the plan, at least, if not the boat itself, that gets you through the ocean. And if you fix that boat, if you come up with a story that inspires you, that shows you that whatever happens in the past, that focuses on the positive things that happened in the past, and you construct a story that tells your story into the future as well, well, it may not everything may happen as you envision it in the story, but if you tell the story about yourself, then you will have a happy future, or at least the chances of having a happy future are really increased, and you will be grateful and have a happy life, and I think that's one of the greatest lessons from to date. If you want to take just one take-home message from today, it's that the United States are a story, and as is everything else, what happens in life, how we see it, that's the story we're telling us. And with that, I hope your story for the week will be a good one. I'll see you again tomorrow. Leave me a comment if you want. I'll answer everyone. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, and so more people will be able to see it as it rises up in the ranks in this magical thing called Google. All right? Take care, and looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow.